Good morning, y'all. Today, I want to walk through an essay that Cal Newport recently published, and I think it raises an interesting point regarding the current political climate we're in. But before I do so, in case you're not familiar with Cal Newport, he's a computer science professor at Georgetown University, but he's also an author, and I'm a huge fan of his work. He's written several books. His most recent one was Slow Productivity, but he also wrote A World Without Email, Digital Minimalism, Deep Work, and a few others. I haven't read some of these older books, but Deep Work and through his most recent one, I've read all of them, and um, they're really fantastic. He just, I mean, the writing isn't incredibly deep. He relies a lot on anecdotes and kind of creates a framework for thinking about things, but a lot of his books kind of challenge pre-existing assumptions about how the world works. So, digital minimalism is all about building boundaries around technology and focuses on, mobile phones in particular, and how the iPhone and app-based mobile computing really changed our relationship with technology. And so, like, how do you think about what role technology plays in your life? So he's done a lot of really good work. These are really easy reads. I would highly recommend reading all of them. I think they're totally worth it. But what I want to focus on today is an essay he recently published titled "On Charlie Kirk and Saving Civil Society," and I'm just usually I highlight things and then I kind of speak to the highlights. I just want to read through this whole thing because it's quite short. It's not very long. I think he makes a really good point, and now we're in this new political era. I really do believe the assassination of Charlie Kirk is a quite literal turning point. We have to figure out where to go from here, and I do think to some degree civil war will be inevitable, but how that impacts us and whether or not America completely deteriorates is going to be up to all of us individually, those of us who are in society. So we can be pushed and prodded, and the media can direct us in one way, and political leadership can direct us in another. But at the end of the day, it's you and I who decide how we respond to it, right? Like the young man who shot Tyler Robinson made a choice. He had agency, and I think this is being lost in a lot of these conversations. There's this assumption that, you know, because of what someone else does, that dictates how you and I act, and that's not the case at all. Like, this young man had a choice. He disagreed with Charlie Kirk for a number of reasons, but at the end of the day, he's the one who made the choice to take another person's life. And I think moving forward, as we move into a political climate where I don't think the violence is going to ramp down anytime soon, um, you and I are going to have the opportunity to make choices on a day-to-day basis. And this essay talks to one choice we can all make, and something I think is worth considering. So let's dive in. So he starts by saying, many of you have been asking me about the assassination of the conservative commentator Charlie Kirk earlier this week during a campus event at Utah Valley University. At the time of this writing, little is yet known about the shooter's motives, but there have been enough cases of political violence over the past year that I think I can say what I'm about to with conviction. Those of us who study online culture like to use the phrase, Twitter is not real life. But as we saw yet again this week, when the digital discourse fostered on services like Twitter and Blue Sky and TikTok do intersect with the real world, whether they originate from the left or the right, the results are often horrific. I just want to pause here and say, I think for those of us who are non-digitally native, who use technology but also have a foot in the analog world, have memories of analog life, we can, it's getting harder to do, but we can decouple what we see online from what exists in reality. The thing with Gen Z and young people is they can't do that because their entire existence has been online, right? They were born, in the late 90s into the early 2010s. Their entire social structure, their understanding of culture, their relationship with politics, how they participate in civil society has all been online. And so I think there's a correlation there. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of violence being carried out by younger people. It's not exclusively younger people, right? With the Tesla takedown protests, there were, several boomers and older people. You see protesters, a lot of anti-Elon Musk protesters who are boomers, right? So it's not exclusively older people or younger people who are participating in this more activist culture. But I will say the ones who are carrying out acts of violence, throwing Molotov cocktails at dealerships, Tesla dealerships, school shootings, this recent assassination attempt. There's more who skew younger than not, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's important to think about, because for young people, Twitter is real life, because the internet is real life. That is their reality. Unlike you and I, who may be able to turn off our computers, turn off our phones, walk away for a little bit of time. That's not possible for them. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, especially if you are of an older generation who doesn't quite understand what it means to be digitally native in today's world. Okay, so he continues by saying, this should tell us all we need to know about these platforms. They are toxic and dehumanizing. They are responsible as much as any other force for the unraveling of civil society that seems to be accelerating. We know these platforms are bad for us, so why are they still so widely used? They tell a compelling story. That all of your frantic tapping and swiping makes you a key part of a political revolution, or a fearless investigator, or a righteous protester. That when you're online, you're someone important doing important things during an important time. But this, for the most part, is an illusion. In reality, you're toiling anonymously in an attention factory, while billionaire overseers mock your efforts and celebrate their growing net worths. After troubling national events, there's only a public conversation about the appropriate way to respond. Here's one option to consider. Quit using these social platforms. Find other ways to keep up with the news or spread ideas or be entertained. Be a responsible grown-up who does useful things. Someone who serves real people in the real world. To save civil society, we need to end our decade-long experiment with global social platforms. We tried them. They became dark and awful. It's time to move on. Enough is enough. I think he gets to the heart of this. I recently did a video about political ideologies and what I'm calling nihilistic fatalism, which I think is an endogenous political ideology of digitally native Gen Zers. They feel like the world is collapsing around them, that society is collapsing around them, and there's just no real point anymore. And so there are factions within this ideology that would rather hasten the collapse and watch it end, watch the fire burn at the end, than do anything about it. And that's what makes it so, again, nihilistic, fatalistic. That's what makes it so distinct from anything we're used to, because these people are communicating online. They're using anonymous identities. They don't interact with the real world. They're just absorbed in Reddit threads and Discord servers. They're exchanging memes, and this whole political ideology has now transcended into the physical world, where things that are happening online are now happening in real life. And this isn't new. Social media has been doing this for a while. I've talked about this in other videos. Just from my perspective of being a millennial woman using things like Instagram and seeing how the aspirational lifestyles I saw on platforms like Instagram impacted decisions I made in my day-to-day life. I started a business, a registered LLC. I started a business based on a belief that we should be better stewards of the planet's resources and we should pursue a zero waste lifestyle. That is a niche luxury belief that was transmitted to me through social media by a bunch of upper class elitists in cities like New York City and cities like Los Angeles that could afford to live that kind of lifestyle. And there was a morality that was attached to that, right? It was the climate is in peril. It is incumbent on each of us as individuals to do something about it. Therefore, if you're not living a zero waste lifestyle, you're a bad person, right? So it's not even just like people are sharing their lives on social media anymore. I think that's a component of it, but it's that it's that social media is a mechanism for transmitting morality in a world that no longer has a unified, cohesive, objective base of morality itself. We're looking for signals from society on how to behave. And over time, I think that morality or those moral signals have transformed. So it's gone from something seemingly benign, right? Like trying to live a zero waste lifestyle, trying to buy groceries without packaging, now to political statements that have led to acts of political violence. So I don't see any part of social media that is good. It's bad. And one of the things he calls attention to in this essay that I find really important is he says, but this for the most part is an illusion. In reality, you're toiling anonymously in an attention factory while billionaire overseers mock your efforts and celebrate their growing net worth. We're participating in these digital echo chambers, not for our benefit, for the benefit of a handful of people in Silicon Valley. We are creating the user generated content that they then sell advertising on. And they're making billions and trillions of dollars. So while everyone is complaining about the cost of living crisis, they're complaining about how billionaires tax shelter their wealth. They're complaining about the power that people like Elon Musk have and Mark Zuckerberg. They're also complicit in participating in the infrastructure that gives them the power and wealth to begin with. So it's kind of hypocritical in my opinion. Like, how can you complain that Elon Musk is a bad person or that Mark Zuckerberg is a bad person, then turn around and use X every day or use Instagram every day, right? Like you have to call a spade here. And I think that's what Cal Newport is doing, finally calling it out. Because these people aren't sowing seeds of discontent for their own pleasure. They're doing it for profit. And if they can profit off of the decline of humanity, then so be it. And so that's why I think he says, quit using these social platforms because they're not doing any good. And I've shared my own anecdote, but think about your own life. You look at a time when you started using these platforms. So for me, Facebook came out when I was at the end of high school. So probably my senior year of high school, I got it. I didn't start using Instagram until my senior year of college, but not seriously until 2014, 2015. I dabbled with TikTok and realized how toxic that was, and that didn't last very long. I used Twitter for a while, stopped for a while, then got back onto X. Do your own audit of your social media use and ask yourself, is your life demonstrably better for it? How many relationships have you gained through social media versus how many have you lost? If you own a business, how many customers have you gained through social media, and what cost has that come to, right? Because these platforms aren't egalitarian either. And this is why I appreciate Cal Newport, because he calls attention to the fact that we exist in a society, especially if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, where you believe you have to be on these platforms in order to grow your business. And he makes the case that that's not true. He's not on social media, right? And he's got his whole podcast. He's got a course. He obviously still teaches at Georgetown. He does obviously the academic writing that has to come with that. He's written a number of books, right? So he's doing just fine. Cal Newport is a prime example of someone who has figured out how to build a brand, a personal brand, and a name for himself without being on social media. So if he can do it, I think it's possible, for the rest of us, how to start thinking about, how do we go back to a world where we can build brands, build relationships, foster friendships without resorting to social media as the intermediary? I think that's, something worth thinking about. But this raises a really important questions about how we exist in the world with each other and the role social media plays. And I'm just as guilty as everyone is of this, right? Even though I see the example that Cal Newport has set, even I have questions okay, how as a writer am I supposed to make it in a world where I don't have an audience like he does, right? How on earth am I supposed to get anything done when I don't have access to publishers and I can't write a book necessarily, or I have to rely on social media and YouTube included, to get my thoughts out. From a monetary perspective, how do you a lot of people make money through this. How do you make money in an economy where white collar jobs are disappearing and the attention economy that we currently live in is so vitriolic that it might not even be worth continuing to create content on? And this is something, ethically I'm constantly grappling with. It's part of me feels like I need to be on X to be on part of the conversation. But as he points out here, it's an illusion, and I'm toiling in an anonymous attention factory. And I also know that to be true. But then there's this urge of, well, maybe the next post will go viral. Maybe the next one will be the big break, you know? And so I'm even like grappling with that. But I think it is time to draw a line in the sand, and say, you know, I'm done with these platforms. I'm not going to use them anymore. And make a collective effort to start humanizing the other, to start humanizing people in your life. You know, there's people who canceled Thanksgiving dinner in 2024 last year because someone on MSNBC told them to, or someone on TikTok told them to. Like, just think about that for a minute there. Someone canceled an engagement with family, with people they are blood related to, because of what a media influencer told them to do. Like that's where we're at. And so I think a lot of us are trying to think, you know, where do we go from here? How do we, you know, it happened. Charlie's gone. We've everyone's come out of the woodwork. We kind of know where things are politically. As Vice President Vance said when he hosted the Charlie Kirk show the other day, like, there is no unity with the other side that is going to dehumanize you. So where do we go from here? Like, what are some of the solutions? So, you know, I think there's a couple. I think, you know, we have to reform the education system. And to do that, that requires participation in it, or active removal of participation of it. So what I mean by that is you going to your local school board meeting, regardless of whether you have kids in the school system, and you hold the people who are elected, because they are publicly elected, you hold school board members accountable. If you are a parent of kids in the school system, you have to make a decision. And this isn't I'm not saying this is as a position of privilege. I'm saying we're in a state where we cannot trust the public school system anymore. And the evidence of that is clear based on the sheer number of academics and teachers and university professors and school administrators who have been fired over their vitriolic posts regarding their celebration of Charlie Kirk's murder, right? So it's clear the school system has been compromised. So if you are a parent of kids in the school system, you have to really think about it, pray about it, you know, figure out how to make it happen, but pull your kids out of the school system. And there's ways to do it. There's affordable ways to do it. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to send your kid to a $40,000, $50,000 a year private school. It doesn't mean that you have to quit your job and homeschool your kids either. I think there's options, but I think people who have been on the fence about this and have been quietly concerned about the public school system, I think now is the time to take action on that, because the more that people start removing their kids from the school system and creating a parallel education system, you know, I think that challenges the hegemony that the leftist narrative has on culture and its ability to indoctrinate people en masse in society. So I think that's an option. I think boycotts are, you know, obviously an option. Boycotting businesses that cater to and hire people who transmit this vitriolic language. Like, yeah, I'm glad people are getting fired because they're being held accountable for celebrating the death of someone they consider a political opponent. But I think businesses themselves need to be held accountable too. I saw a video on X of a woman who went to Starbucks, ordered Charlie Kirk's favorite drink. It was he drank green tea with honey. So she ordered it, and then when she was asked by the barista for a name, she said Charlie Kirk, and the barista refused to write a political name. Similar thing happened at Office Depot. There was someone who went in to print a poster for a vigil. It had Charlie Kirk's name, you know, his birth and death year, and then a picture of him, and they refused to do it because they considered it political propaganda. So I think it's incumbent on us as citizens who want to live in a safe and prosperous civil society to hold those businesses accountable. So I think en masse, it is time to boycott, places like Starbucks. It is time to boycott places like Office Depot. And all you got to do is walk into some of these businesses and see who they've employed, to kind of know where their leanings are. I think it's time to hold businesses accountable. Same with sponsors. If there is a sponsor of a, podcast, I don't know. Hassan Piker is a well-known streamer. I don't know if he gets sponsorship dollars. I'm sure he probably does. If there is a company sponsoring him, it's time to boycott that company as well, to let them know that we as a civil society do not agree with them providing financial support to that kind of toxic rhetoric. But then also, I think we need to start considering our relationship individually with social media and stop giving these people our attention to begin with. And I know that's easier said than done. Like, I don't know how to remove myself from social media, I've already gotten off Facebook. I don't use that. I've gotten off of Instagram. I don't use TikTok. I don't use Snapchat. The ones I'm really using right now, to some degree, LinkedIn, X to some degree, and then Substack. But other than that, I've tried to remove myself from some of them. But I think the rest of us ought to do the same. I think we need to reevaluate our relationship with technology, with social media, and understand how destructive this has been within our society. And you don't even just have to look at the political assassination of Charlie Kirk as evidence of this. Jonathan Haidt has done wonderful work studying the impact of social media on young people and the relationship between that and mental health. So the proliferation of app-based mobile computing and the decline and deterioration of teenage mental health. Like, there's a clear correlation there. That you had the whistleblower from Facebook that testified before Congress that Facebook knows, right? And they're exploiting it. They're taking advantage of young people. I think we as the older adults in the room need to pull the young people away from the devices and teach them how to live an analog life. So what does that look like? Like, getting to know your neighbor, having block parties. Like, can we make block parties great again, where people just, like, block off some roads and, put some cones at the end of the street, get some games out, get some tables, everyone, like, potlucks, brings food out, just hanging out together. Like, we need to do that again. Participating in your local civil society, like, go play bingo at the American Legion, like, just going and doing things, volunteering, volunteering costs nothing. It costs absolutely nothing to go do, except for your time. So encouraging people to volunteer, to get off their devices and go do things, to go hiking, to start gardening, doing things with their hands. I think that's so important. And there's a commonality between young people and the lack of physical tactile work that they do. And so I think it's up to the adults in the room to restructure society in a way that reflects a civil, prosperous, stable society that we all want to live in. We can agree to disagree on any number of things, but it has to be civil, stable, and prosperous. Okay. So we have to agree on that. And then it's up to the adults in the room to figure out how to make that happen, because the politicians aren't going to do it, right? The billionaires in Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, they're not going to do it. And Gen Z, they are in a state of arrested development and stunted adolescence. So even if, the older ones who are in their late 20s, they still don't behave as if they are adults because they haven't fully gotten to become adults, right? They don't own homes. They're mired in debt. They don't have real jobs. They're in a state of arrested development, which will probably continue for the foreseeable future. So we need to figure out a way to help them get into adulthood, get them off of these platforms, and then reconnect with culture outside of the digital realm. And I think it's going to be up to us to do that, because they need to be led. They need leadership, and we need to be the ones to provide it. So I think we have to set the example. So that requires us getting off of social media, us voting with our wallets and boycotting companies that engage in this type of behavior. And it requires us starting businesses to employ young people, to give them opportunities. It requires leadership from us. And I think I'm starting to think that's the direction we need to head in. But social media, I think, is a really key piece to this, and I'm really glad Cal Newport wrote this essay, because I think he's absolutely right. If you want to stop the divisive political rhetoric, you have to stop the mechanism that is transmitting it. And so far, if the people, the publications, the mainstream media publications, the individual content creators are rewarded, and then the platforms themselves are all rewarded for producing more and more vitriolic content, if they're rewarded with eyeballs and subscribers and profit and ad revenue and likes and impressions, if they're rewarded, they're going to keep doing it, right? Because that's how these systems were built. So you have to remove all of that. You have to disincentivize people from producing vitriolic content, and the only way to do that is to make it so that it's not profitable anymore, so it's not appealing. And so that's why we have to vote with our wallets, vote with our feet, vote with our eyeballs, because it's not going to make change any other way. And I think a lot of people en masse have to agree to do this, and that's going to be the hard part. But I think he writes an interesting piece here, and I think this is worth really thinking about. Like I said, he's written a lot of stuff on this topic. I highly recommend his books, particularly Digital Minimalism. I think that really touches to the idea of getting off of social media and what he talked about here. But I would love to know your thoughts on this, like your relationship with social media, if you think it's been a net good or a net negative for society. And if you could remove yourself from it, like how exactly would you do so? Or maybe even better question, like what are your biggest fears about leaving social media and re-entering, if you will, the real world? Like what do you fear the most? Because fear of missing out is a huge component of the appeal to social media. So what do you fear the most, and what do you think you could do about that to mitigate that fear? I'd be really curious to know your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this analysis, I would love it if you would like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.